Good evening, everyone. Let's begin our talk on Masterclass, the art of making world-class games. We have with us today Mr. Vishal Gondal, founder and CEO, GOQii. I would request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and our speaker will address a selected at the end of the session. Over to you, sir.
Hi, thank you. Uh, you know, uh, it's interesting that I am talking about the art of making video games almost 20, 25 years after I started programming or coding my own games. So I think it's like life is coming a full circle for me, especially since I am back into the gaming business doing my new gaming startup. But just to give you some sense of, again, 15 minutes is not enough for me to literally tell you how to code a game. But I just wanted to take you through some of my learnings in India Games, my avatar as India Games, and what am I now doing differently as I try to reimagine the world of games, and especially from an Indian context. So the first point really is, if you look at my background, while I started playing games much earlier, I'm talking about the early 90s. I started my life as a games programmer. And the kind of games I programmed was firstly the kind of games I like to play. So I played a lot of Doom and, those kind of early casual games, games like Pac-Man. And this I'm talking about, way early. I'm talking about the generation of the Z80 processor and 286, 386 Pentium. I mean, really, really early days of computing. And while at India Games, which I founded in 1999, we raised several rounds of funding. We focused on four or five key genres. One, of course, was cricket. Me and my team actually coded one of the first mobile cricket games way back in 2000. It was called Cricket Fever, actually, and even now, Cricket Fever is kind of prominently there on the app stores. But later on, our whole focus was how could we take cricket as a category itself and scale it up in a much bigger way. So cricket, of course, continues to be a big category. I know there are many publishers and developers creating cricket-based games. Apart from cricket, we did get into licensing and we got a number of Bollywood and Hollywood licenses and created games around it. And of course, there were games on various other local topics like mythology, etc. However, the time that was very different. We're talking about the early days of the mobile phone itself, where people were using their first mobile devices, and Nokia was the flavor of the year with the 200 KB and 300 KB and 500 KB file sizes, not 500 MB or GB file sizes, which we are talking about today. So those times the challenges were very different, and the entire market was kind of controlled by the mobile operators who had their own, what they used to call stores, or Airtel Live and Vodafone Live, and Reliance had their own stores. So each mobile operator had their own app offerings, and you literally had to have multiple deals with multiple operators. Not only in India, in our case, we were distributing it globally, and revenue sharing was completely at a different level, where you were just getting 30% and 70% was going to the carrier. Fast forward to today, all of us have very powerful mobile devices. Our phones, our Android devices, or Apple devices are very powerful computing devices, very good for gaming. We now have a unified app store model with Google Play as well, and Apple offering this. Of course, I don't want to get into the revenue sharing, that's a different debate. But I think clearly the opportunity is large. So while I did exit my business in 2012, we sold India Games to Disney, and I was with Disney for about a year. Um, and I had a non-compete, so technically I could not do gaming, which is why I entered GOQii. Uh, my non-compete ended in 2018, and in 2019, me along with another set of founders, we started creating Encore games with our own set of gaming. And what I've realized is that for you to figure out what needs to be done is just open your Google Play Store and look at the top 10 or top 30 apps or top 50 apps. And you'll be shocked to see that except maybe Ludo King and a couple other stray apps, none of the other apps are based on Indian IP, Indian themes, or are even owned by Indian companies. The app store is completely dominated by either Western or Chinese companies. Of course, a lot of them are now currently off the store, but it's kind of shocking that the gaming business in India has absolutely no major Indian player. Of course, I know there are a lot of Indian companies doing Dream 11 and Fantasy and Rummy. And once again, I don't classify them as games. They are, real money or whatever kind of gaming. That's not gaming for me. That's not the kind of games I played up growing. I grew up playing. I think when it comes to gaming, I am talking about games which are intuitive, fun, which have replayability, which we can spend hours and days playing, and which are not necessarily around the whole fantasy or gambling aspect of gaming. So that's not what I want to talk about. So if you look at this whole thing, clearly we have missed something very big in the gaming industry. Just look at Amazon, Amazon Prime. The content of Amazon Prime is now local. In fact, they are going hyper local. There is Telugu, Tamil. So OTT, Netflix is investing millions on Indian content, and there are so many Indian OTT channels. Similarly, if you looked at videos on Instagram or TikTok, whenever TikTok was available, they were all local videos which connected with local people. But that's not what has happened in the games business. So clearly, I think the only and one big lesson in the gaming masterclass for all the gamers out there is to create gaming IPs which would appeal Indians, which are fundamentally Indian. And I think that's what at least we are setting out to do at Encore. But that does not stop any one of you to look at this. And I mean, there is no dearth of stories, there is no dearth of concepts, there is no dearth of IPs when you come to India. I think the challenge has been, I think people have not really invested enough. And when I talk about investment, I'm talking about production quality. So just give you an example here. Today, a consumer in India, they have access to the best apps in the world. People are using WhatsApp and Uber, and they are using Amazon. So for anybody else in those segments, Ola has to be as good as Uber, or Paytm or Flipkart needs to be as good as any of the global best. And that's when people are going to consume. And similarly, on the content side, people are looking at very high production quality when it comes to even videos, on Netflix or Amazon Prime, because people have tasted very high quality content. So when you look at Indian content, we are really seeing the same low quality content getting rehashed, or what we call reskinned, which is really a poor strategy. I think it's time that serious investment is given in the localized IPs. And the good news is there is a lot of talent. I think thanks to India being the backend for so many global game companies, there is no dearth of talent when it comes to India. I think what really we are all looking for is how can we really now focus on this, because like I said, my goal is that out of the top 10 or top 30, at least 60 to 70% of the content needs to be Indian content, by hopefully Indian developers, because yeah, there are a lot of Chinese companies who are making Ludo and Rummy. So I'm not counting that, but I'm really talking about the IP driven businesses. Similarly, when it comes to monetization, I think now there has been a lot of maturity on the monetization models, whether it is in app purchases, whether it is ad funding, whether there is performance. So I think there is so much innovation happening on at the revenue models itself. I don't think so. That is a problem, because early days of gaming, we read about how do we bill, how do we collect. There was a lot of revenue leakage, which we talked about. None of those problems are there today. It's a perfect market. India has actually recorded the highest amount of downloads for Google Play, the number of games downloaded, I think the number was as high as some 7 billion or something. So I think it's all about how we imagine, how we take it. Already there are a couple of good questions here, so let me take that. And if you have any more questions, please feel free to keep adding it so that I can cover it. So one question is: Does does India's focus on local prevent it games from becoming relatable for the global audience? I think once again, it's gaming has no language. A lot of times, I mean, when we played Mario or when you played a lot of the games, the themes were all global. So I think fundamentally, what is required in a game is it should be fun, it should be replayable, it should be addictive, all of that. And then the story adds to it. And of course, in certain genres of gaming, story and localization plays a big role. For example, in the past, there were a lot of these MMORPGs from Korea and China with very cute characters. So somehow those characters don't have as much appeal in India. So clearly, if you look at certain social or cultural instincts, content works and content doesn't work. But at the same time, if you look at content like Fortnite or PUBG, they were very, very Western content and they worked completely well over here. In fact, one of the most popular games at one point of time was Ragnarok, which was again very different. So I think this focus on local doesn't really, I mean, India itself is a big market right now. I think if you can just create and get like how Ludo King started. Ludo, while is doing really well in India, it doesn't have as much as an appeal outside India, again, because of a cultural context. But there are certain other games like Monopoly and Scrabble, which have a lot of traction in Western world, but that's not the game which we grew up in India, especially because the bulk of the population may not be exposed to this. Talking about the next question, what do you think are the reasons for India's lack of growth in comparison to global standards for gaming industry? Again, like I said, it is not that there is not growth. In fact, India gaming, the downloads have been phenomenal. A lot of revenue has started being made. The problem has been this revenue has not come to Indian companies at all. Most of it has gone outside of India. And I think that's the core problem. If you look at from a consumption perspective, clearly after social media, gaming is the number one from an engagement, download, all perspectives, right? I mean, while some of us are not doing gaming, but the majority of the younger folks are all uh, today playing games on either their phones or any other platforms. Um, what are the sources of funding can upcoming game developers look at for the entire industry? Are there any government grants? Listen, the best part about gaming is that don't worry about the funding. Start creating a kick-ass game. Of course, you may say that, oh, it requires a lot of money, but gaming is one business. In fact, I don't know if you know, one of the most successful games was made by just two people. This game was called Temple Run. A husband-wife team made it. So the bottom line is that, yeah, while you require a lot of money, but for creating games, a kid can create a game, but uh, and from a funding perspective, now there are a lot of avenues. I think whether it is early angel funding to, I know there are now certain game specific funds also coming up. So I think you can, and there is the IGDC, the Indian Game Developers Conference. They have a lot of options for that. So I think you can definitely look for a lot of these things around gaming. Another question: with cloud gaming entering the picture, how should the gamers try to adopt their games? So once again, I think cloud gaming is a technology fix. The game needs to be fun, the graphics quality needs to be great. All that is what gaming companies needs to focus on. I think cloud gaming would be a reality, not in the short to medium term, but clearly the medium to long term, with 5G becoming prevalent, with low latency. There is absolutely cloud gaming is going to be here, and especially in a price sensitive market like India, where people don't want to invest in very high end hardware. But at the end of the day, as like I said, gamers need to create a kick-ass game. Now, how the game is going to get rendered on the server, how will that be streamed? I think between Nvidia, Google, and a lot of other companies, they're all working on those different solutions. So I'm sure that is something you don't need to worry about as such. With that, I think we are just about it. There is one more question. If anybody wants to ask, I'll be happy to take, or you can anyway reach me offline on platforms like Twitter or LinkedIn. Once again, thanks a lot for having me here, and I hope that people will take up to creating even higher quality games and make India shine in the world of gaming.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gondal, for being here with us today. Truly, in 15 minutes, it was a very interesting conversation and very great points that you gave us. Other thanks to our creative partners, Ethnos, and Institute partner, Asian Institute of Design. Once again, thank you so much for being with us. Have a great day.